So the other questions I get a lot are, well, why SaaS? And there's kind of boring answers to why SaaS. So there's a generic answer to SaaS, that it's a lower cost of ownership. Because we can fire up containers in SaaS, we can scale up, scale down quickly, we can much more effectively and efficiently utilize infrastructure, and that means we can provide the service at a lower cost than you can provide the service with dedicated on-prem capabilities. So there's kind of like a lower cost element. Linked into that lower cost element is just the agility. I work with huge global organizations that can take 6 months to fire up a server and configure it. You know, to scale your SaaS deployment for new use cases, for additional users and so on, is, there is, in some cases it will just automatically just scale. You've got the licenses, you can have more infrastructure, more users and so on. So there's obviously kind of that whole element of reduced infrastructure cost, more scalability, quicker provisioning. You can get a SaaS tenant fired up in 10 minutes if you're speedy. It's pretty quick. There is some work around the data movement, and I'll flick on to some of the challenges and the problem. Let's say, I shouldn't use the word problem, should I? I do work in a sales organization, but yeah, there are some sort of sticky wickets and problem areas that you want to get ahead of before you get into an implementation. And Frank, when we get to that, hopefully we'll get to that, then do chip in. The other thing I think is really important is this dev test process. So a lot of customers have separate dev, test, and production environments as often as a minimum. And with client-managed environments, it can be quite tricky. Some people might have used the Qlik deployment framework. It can be quite tricky and time-consuming, the whole release management process of, you've got different environments, different settings, different data connections. Moving apps through that life cycle can be clunky and difficult. Within SaaS, we just use those spaces to manage that. And of course, because every app is spun up in a container, they are probably physically, you can't guarantee that on a cloud platform, but almost certainly physically separated, logically separated. So you could completely crash and burn one of your apps. It's not going to affect anything. So what that then means as well, everything, because it's all containerized, it's totally portable. So moving apps from dev to test to production, that whole release cycle can be a lot slicker, smoother, lower overhead. You can also use Qlik App Automation to start driving DevOps processes, so start promoting apps on a schedule, and doing a whole range of other application development and lifecycle release management activities in an automated way. So that also kind of reduces the cost a lot and so on. So that's a lot about cost and some of that other stuff there. The other thing then that I see a lot, I have organizations that spend 6 months planning their on-prem upgrades, and then they don't do it very often, so it doesn't deliver any value to the business and so on. So, of course, with SaaS, the SaaS model, you're getting those updates without having to do any work, and that shouldn't be underestimated, that sort of currency. Then, of course, the common question is, some of those updates we don't want. We don't want that new authoring experience because that's going to confuse our users, so we need some time to implement that. So what we do try and do is where there's major changes to the user interface, then we try and give the choice to customers. Eventually, they'll have to accept it. Like after a certain grace period, say 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever, they have to accept the change because you can't run a SaaS platform on all sorts of different crazy configurations. But what it does allow you to do is have an option at first to accept that change. This is what we've done with the simplified authoring experience. And then you can, if you're not ready, you can have a communications campaign, run that, and then when you're ready, turn it on. Or if you don't get your act together, it's gonna happen anyway at some point. But there is some sort of like leeway there, at least. It changes, big UI changes aren't just forced onto you. That's kind of a point to say. Uptime, scalability. Look, uptime's an interesting one. The cloud service does have problems sometimes. I think there was a recent one, I shouldn't even say this really, but hey, look, we're all friends. There was a recent one, I think maybe earlier this week. But everyone has downtime, every service has downtime. It's no different to any others. At least it's not your responsibility. So just think of it that way if it goes down. But generally it's very resilient, and those are all obvious advantages.